Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Today I want to give you a very sophisticated scientific talk about a scientific proof of the existence of God based on Einstein's special theory of relativity. And this isn't something that you'll probably ever end up teaching the children, but it is a worthwhile thing to know, and it is also worthwhile to know by hearing it that a valid scientific proof for the existence of God does actually exist. Because this is something that scientists have claimed there could never be. I mean, this is actually within the philosophy of science. It is the idea that scientists don't have to deal with questions regarding God, because God is outside the area of where science can go. But this is an out-of-date idea now, and it turns out that proof of the existence of God does exist where science can go. And I already mentioned to you, but I will just briefly mention again. Through the history of mankind, there have been people trying to prove the existence of God for a very long time. But basically, in the past, they had always been logical or philosophical proofs of the existence of God. And I did mention two of them, one of them being the very famous watchmaker argument, the idea that if you come across something as complex as a watch, you just, by logic and by exclusion of other possibilities, you just know that the matter of the universe just didn't come together in the way that makes up a watch. That just isn't going to happen. So therefore, there has to be a watchmaker. And since our universe is so unbelievably huge and unbelievably complex, and also works to an unbelievable level of precision, that the workings of the universe are so much more amazing than the workings of a watch, that it's almost in another category. So therefore, since a watch needs a watchmaker, the universe must have a universe maker. And the only conceivable way that a universe could be made is by a being who we describe as God. Essentially a being that is perfect and absolute in all of his characteristics. And then when Einstein came along with his special and general theories of relativity, the special theory of relativity deals with the special nature of light, and the general theory of relativity deals with the special nature of gravity, because they have special characteristics. And Einstein's general theory of relativity had as one of its necessary logical implications was that the universe is expanding. So if the universe was expanding in the future, therefore in the past it was smaller and smaller, the further you went back in the past, the smaller it was, and if you went far enough back in the past, it didn't exist. It had no size at all. And that was a bit too much for Einstein to handle, and so he fudged or falsified his theories and put in a constant that took that implication out, and later apologized to the world for that. But the reason he was so, he found that idea so unacceptable was that that idea had never existed in humankind before, except in the Quran, where Allah had said that he was expanding the universe with his power. So, since we knew then that the universe had a beginning, for the universe to have a beginning, it has to have some way to begin. I mean, if something has a beginning, there has to be some cause for it to begin. And when you think about what are the possible causes for a universe which is made up of immensely huge amounts of space, time, and matter to come from nothingness, meaning no time, no space, and no matter, the only possible conclusion that you can arrive at is that it had to be created by a being such as God. There's just no other possible answer that you can come up with. So, still, scientists were saying that scientists have been saying for a long time that regardless of whether or not God existed, that wasn't an issue for science, because whether or not God existed, the proof would have to be outside of the area that science can look at. And they said science only looks at the physical universe. That's the limits of science. And that was true until Einstein came along. But Einstein actually, although I think from something Einstein instead said, he didn't actually realize that his work went beyond the bounds of the physical universe. Because I've mentioned several times the name of one of his most important theories, the special theory of relativity. But Einstein didn't call this theory the special theory of relativity. Einstein called it his absolutism theory. And the reason he called it that is, he said, in light, I have found the one thing in a relative universe that is absolute. So Einstein said that the only absolute thing he found in the relative universe was absolute. Now, one of the things that allowed me to come up with a lot of the ideas that I have told you is that very early in my life I started doing something with knowledge, which is asking the question, what does that mean? So usually people ask like who, what, why, where, and when. But for me, a very important question had always been, what does this information mean? And when I saw that Einstein had shown that light was the only absolute thing, according to him, the only absolute thing, he had found the only absolute thing that existed in the physical universe. The question I asked then is, what does it mean for light to be the only absolute thing in the universe? Because in a relative universe, not the universe, in a relative universe, everything else is relative. And that's why his theories are called the theories of relativity, because they deal with, they show that everything in the universe is relative and not absolute. And I thought, this is really odd to say that we have a relative universe which has something absolute in it. See, I mean, just semantically, this is nonsense. If you have a universe that is relative, that means it has no absolutes. And Einstein said he found an absolute. So I started looking at what does Einstein's special theory of relativity say about light? And what I found is the reason that light is absolute is that light does not exist in the physical universe. So Einstein was actually mistaken in thinking he had found something absolute in the physical universe. He had actually found something absolute that was outside the physical universe, but observable from within the physical universe. And what it appears is light is the interface or the connection between the non-physical absolute existence and the non-absolute relative existence, which is the physical world. And for something to be in the physical universe, there are certain requirements to exist here. The three requirements for something to be part of the physical universe are: one, it must occupy volume of space. Two, I'll explain these in a minute, must have mass. And three, in a flow of time. So for something to be of the physical universe, first one, it has to have a volume. What that means is it basically has to have 3 dimensions. This whiteboard marker, it's a certain amount long, it's a certain amount high, and it's a certain amount wide. If it didn't have those 3 dimensions, it wouldn't be here, right? I mean, if it does, so, I mean, it sounds simple, but this is actually a characteristic. For something to exist, it has to be there. It has to occupy some space, right? If it doesn't occupy any space, it's not there. The second one is mass. Mass is always a difficult concept to describe. It's sort of probably easiest to think of mass like weight, but mass is actually the quality of having inertia, which is really, the heavier it is, the harder it is to move. But you can think of it like weight, right? So if it doesn't have any weight, or if it doesn't take any energy to move it, then it has no mass. So everything in the physical universe has some mass. And the third one, it has to be involved in a flow of time. So there was a time when this didn't exist, there was a time when somebody made it, and then it's been hanging around for, who knows how long, and tomorrow it'll be a day older than it is now, right? So everything in the physical universe is involved in a flow of time, almost always from the past to the future. Now, if something didn't have any of those 3 characteristics, it would not exist in the physical universe. But it turns out, according to Einstein's special theory of relativity, light has none of those 3 characteristics. So therefore, absolutely does not exist in the physical universe. It cannot be considered part of the physical existence. The first one, about occupying volume of space, so I'll tell you why it doesn't occupy volume of space according to Einstein's special theory of relativity. We usually think of speed or velocity, we'll call it speed, as being an absolute thing. But speed is not really an absolute. It is a relative thing. And actually, that's not why it loses volume, but it's an important thing also I want to tell you. But let me wait for just a minute on these. I want to tell you one other very, very important thing. You know, I've been saying to you that virtually all the problems of the world exist because we hold a wrong worldview, and that wrong worldview is based on secular materialism. And secular materialism is based originally on the science on materialist science that came from Sir Isaac Newton's theories 400 or however many years, 400 or 500 years ago, whatever it was. And Isaac Newton's theories looked at things such as speed as absolutes. So Sir Isaac Newton didn't realize that some concepts that he was measuring and putting into formula were actually not absolutes. So I want to show you a very common theory, or a very common formula that everybody knows that would have come essentially from the work of Sir Isaac Newton. But you have to realize all of his formula suffer from the same kind of problem. But I'll just show you a very simple one to show you how the basis of secular materialism is incorrect. You see, because if the science itself is based on a false premise, then the philosophies that were developed from that science, they must automatically be false philosophies. And the cultural practices that come from those philosophies have to be wrong cultural practices. This is why I say today, virtually everything we have that is wrong in the world comes from the initial wrongness of materialist science and a worldview that now includes secular materialism as being correct, when secular materialism is wrong, not right. So if we act according to a world that we view as a secular materialistic world, then we will naturally act wrongly. Now this is how simple you can prove this theory is wrong. I'll show you a formula that everyone will have learned in school somewhere along the way. It's about the addition of velocities. If you are on a motorcycle and you are going 40 kilometers an hour, and you throw a ball straight ahead from that motorcycle, and you throw the ball at the speed of 30 kilometers an hour, how fast is the ball going? So you would learn V1, volume 1 plus volume 2 equals volume 3. And if it is 40 K plus 30 K equals 70 K. So that ball would be traveling 70 kilometers an hour. Okay. This is what it would be taught in school. And while it is true, if you add the numbers 40 and 30, you get 70. And it seemed logical to think that the velocities that were counted in numbers work just the same way as numbers. But that turns out not to be true, and it was proven untrue by Einstein's special theory of relativity. Velocities are not numbers. Velocities are different than numbers. And so what the answer to this would be with relativity it would be which way is the symbol for less than go? This way? This way, right? When you add velocities, 40 and 30, you get a number less than 70. You see, because velocities are relative. They are not absolutes. Numbers are absolutes. 40 is exactly 40. 40 is only relative to how you see it as an observer. And the way we see velocities, they are very, very close. So the number, the actual answer in small velocities like this might be, which you can say, well, that's not a big deal. But what if your velocities here, instead of being slow like that, were fast velocities? And you are on a spaceship and you're traveling 90% speed of light. And you shine a light ahead from the spaceship, and light travels at the speed of light. So we'll call that 0.9. So if I add 0.9 to 1, what would I get with Newton's theories? I get 1.9 speed of light. But if I add them here, .9 and 1 equals 1, because nothing goes faster than the speed of light is. The actual formula that Newton described the workings of the world by are actually incorrect. They only look like they are correct at slow speeds and low gravities. But when you get up to high speeds and high gravities, the numbers are totally nonsense. They are so far off, they are not even close. So what this has shown is that there is a basic wrongness to the original formulations of materialist science. Now, I didn't show you why that is, because it gets a little more complicated. When you add the numbers, you have to add, in relativity theory, you have to add a different way than you add here, because the numbers are relative and they are changing depending on speed. But when you work it out, it comes out exactly that way. The 0.9 and 1, when you're talking about velocities, add to 1. So, does everybody see the important implication of that? You don't have to understand why they add to that. It's just that one is wrong and one is right. And it turns out, when Einstein's special and general theories have been put into experimentation, what he predicts always comes out accurate to, 8 or 9 or 10 decimal points. So, I mean, if you don't understand the implication of it, say so, because that's the whole point. The implication is the only thing that is important here. The implication is, what is proven here is that Newton's formula are actually incorrect. And they only happen to look like they were correct because we are looking from such a slow speed. When we're looking at 30 and 40 kilometers an hour, the numbers are so close relativistically to the actual numbers, to absolute numbers, that they seem to add up right. And our measuring devices, if you measure with a speed gun or something, the motorcycle and the ball, you'll see the ball, it'll say it goes 70. Because the speed device isn't accurate down to 8 or 9 decimal places. But when you get up to fast speeds, you see, the differences are huge. So the point is, it is a true fact that materialist science is incorrect. The formula of materialist science is incorrect. Therefore, the philosophies are incorrect, and therefore the cultural practices are incorrect. And we now, with Einstein's theories of relativity, have a way to to view the universe correctly. It has to do with the nature of absolutes. So, now I was going to show you why light does not have any of these three characteristics that are necessary to exist in the physical universe. And also, I think one of the things you see is that with Newton's theories, things are the way that you think they would be. With Einstein's theories, things are the way they really are. So the difference is between how things appear to be and how things really are. So, if I start making this marker go faster and faster in this direction like this, right? It's just traveling along like a spaceship in this direction. And it goes faster and faster. One of the things that Einstein's special theory of relativity says is as velocity increases, one dimension decreases. And the dimension that decreases is the one in parallel to the line of flight. In other words, this dimension. As this goes faster and faster, this dimension gets smaller and smaller. When you get to the speed of light, this dimension is 0. So what is the volume of this? If one dimension is 0, the volume is 0. So it occupies no volume of space. It is not there. Now, I mean, I think that's really quite amazing, right? But they have actually done experiments in satellites that have shown that there is a decrease, and that decrease is accurate to 8 or 9 decimal points, according to what Einstein's theory was.
So once something can attain the speed of light,
it is constantly getting getting shorter. I mean, the faster you drive your car down the highway, the shorter your car is, right? But because we are at very slow speeds, it's immeasurably shorter. Although it is, if you could measure accurately, you know, to 10 decimal places, you would see your car get shorter. The faster it goes, the shorter it is. Now, I mean, that's what's called counterintuitive. That's not what you would think the way the world would be, but that is how the world is. See, Einstein's special and general theories of relativity, they tell us how the world actually is. This is why it's so important, because how the world actually is how Allah made the world to be. Right? So we don't want to be thinking Allah made the world the way Newton saw it if he's wrong. We want to see the world the way Allah actually made the world to be. And then on this idea of having the positive active motivational worldview, if we're going to act logically in accord with what we perceive as reality, we have to perceive the correct reality. And the correct reality is described by the absolute theories of relativity rather than the relative theories of materialist science. Then on the second one, this, I don't know how much it weighs. Let's just say it weighs, I'm very bad with metrics, 10 grams. I don't know if that's a realistic guess or not, but I'll say 10 grams. Einstein's special theory of relativity says, the faster you go, the greater the mass is. And so, while this starts out weighing 10 grams, once you get to the speed of light, its mass becomes infinite. So the only thing that could travel at the speed of light and not have infinite mass is this is why it is said nothing can travel through space at the speed of light, right? Because if it did, it would have infinite mass. And obviously we don't have things traveling around with infinite mass. Light, though, does travel at the speed of light, and it doesn't have infinite mass. The only way you cannot have infinite mass at the speed of light is if you start with a mass of 0. See, 0, no matter how much you increase it by, no matter what you multiply it by, remains 0. So therefore, it means that its rest mass is 0. And then as it accelerates, that mass cannot increase because there was nothing to increase. See, if a photon of light had 1/1,000,000th of a gram mass, it would still be infinite at the speed of light. It doesn't matter whether it's this or the planet Earth. It doesn't matter. Both of them, when they reach the speed of light, would have infinite mass. Any mass at all, when it reaches the speed of light, becomes infinite. And we know that the mass of photons is not infinite. You could imagine what would happen to our planet if we kept being hit by the sunlight, photons of sunlight with infinite mass. Well, we'd be smashed and there'd be nothing anywhere. So light has no mass. Then the third one, about being involved in the flow of time. Einstein's special theory of relativity says, as you approach the speed of light, time slows down. Time also is not an absolute, just as velocity is not an absolute. So the faster you go, the slower time passes. When you reach the speed of light, time does not pass. No time is passing at the speed of light. So the speed of light is roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. And I'll have to say it not in metric, because I only know the numbers not in metric, right? The Earth in non-metric is about 93 million miles from the sun. And light in miles travels 186,000 miles per second. So if you divide 93 million by 186,000, you'll find out that it would take about 8 1/4 minutes for light to get from the sun to the Earth. Right? And if we measure it, we will see that it takes about 8 1/4 minutes. We can actually measure a bit of light as it leaves the sun, and we watch it, and it arrives here 8 1/4 minutes later, right? From our point of view. But because light is traveling at the speed of light, you have to ask the question, how, from the point of view of the speed of light, if I look at my watch here on Earth, it takes 8 1/4 minutes for light to get from the sun to the Earth. But what if the photon had a little tiny wristwatch and it's looking at its watch? How long does it take to get from the sun to the Earth? It takes 0 time. See, time is not passing. So from the point of view of the photon, it takes 0 time to get from the sun to the Earth. Now that sounds a bit hard to believe, doesn't it? That the faster you go, the slower time goes. But they actually did an experiment. They took 2 atomic clocks. And atomic clocks are accurate down to, I don't know, 1/billionth or 1/trillionth of a second or something. And they synchronized them here on Earth, so they're exactly the same time. And they kept one here on Earth, and they sent one up in a spaceship in a satellite, and let it go around the Earth for a few months. And it's going much faster than the one on Earth, right? The one on Earth is traveling about 1,000 miles an hour. The Earth rotates at about 1,000 miles an hour. But the satellite is going about 90,000 miles an hour. So it's going 90 times as fast. When they bring the satellite down and they check the 2 clocks, the one that was up there going fast, not as much time had passed. when they checked how much less time it was accurate to what Einstein's special theory would say, down to about 8 or 9 or 10 decimal points. So, although it sounds unreasonable to us that time can slow down as you go faster, actually that is the way that the world is. That's the way Allah made the world to be. And so, since at the speed of light, which is what the speed light travels, time does not pass, light is not involved in the flow of time. So the three necessary characteristics to be part of the physical universe, light doesn't have any of them. If just one of them was missing, it wouldn't be part of the physical universe. But for light, all three are missing. So there is no question that light is not part of the physical existence. But since we can obviously see it here, we have to say it is observable from the physical existence. And because it was observable from the physical existence, we assumed it was here. And Einstein assumed it was here. That's why he said, "In light I have found the only absolute thing that exists in the relative universe." Because he couldn't conceive of the possibility of light not being here. And he just didn't even realize the logical, the obvious logical fallacy of saying in a relative universe there exists an absolute thing. If an absolute thing existed in a relative universe, the universe would not be relative. So this is the kind of thing you can get, you see, from asking questions like, what does that mean? Like the question I asked, what does it mean that light is absolute in a relative universe? What it means is, it isn't there. And you wouldn't come to that conclusion unless you asked that question. And then after I asked that question, I then started looking at the characteristics of light. And the way to look at the characteristics of light is to use Einstein's special theory of relativity, because that's exactly what it is about. It is about the special nature of light. And what did it tell us? That light does not have the three characteristics that are required to be part of the physical universe. So you'll notice in my talks before, I had just mentioned that, you know, and why this is important. Remember I was saying how Allah sends messages from outside of space and time. Right? Well, the only reason I am justified in saying Allah sends messages from outside of space and time is because I was able to prove light is outside space and time. If light existed within the physical universe, I wouldn't be justified in saying Allah sends messages from outside space and time to matter in the universe to tell it what to do. See, so this is how these things fit together and how it is very important. But really amazing things fit together. It's necessary to know that light does not exist as part of the physical universe to understand the proof of the existence of God. Because if somebody wants to prove that God does not exist, the question is, what do you prove? What actually would constitute a proof that God does not exist? What if I could have a old white-haired man wearing a white robe appear in the room suddenly, rise up into the air, unsupported, and say to us all, "I am God"? Would you believe it? No, you know. The logical thing to think is that I know some sort of magic trick. Right? Because that's no proof that God exists. Because he would not be exhibiting the characteristics of God. So, you know, so the thing is, I mean, sort of try and think to yourself, what could prove God exists? And one of the handicaps, of course, we have in trying to prove God exists is we know that the essence of Allah is unknowable. So I cannot prove to you Allah's essence, because it is unknowable. But what is knowable about Allah? His attributes are knowable, right? So if I could prove the existence of some of his attributes, then it would seem that would prove God existed. But particularly if I could prove Allah's attributes existed outside the physical existence, outside of space and time, that would even be a greater proof of the existence of God. Now, when you, if you had a box that was bigger than the universe, and somebody said to you, "What do you think is in that box?" You have no way at all of knowing, right? Absolutely anything you know of, including the universe itself, could be in that box. There's no limit to what could be in that box. But what if, for thousands of years, many, many million people had been saying the same thing was in that box? You know, what I'm saying is, basically, all human beings for most of human history had said, "I know what's in that box." They've never seen it, but somehow or other they think they know, and they all know the same thing. That wouldn't be proof of what's in the box, would it? But it would be quite amazing if when you finally looked in the box, you saw the thing that the people said that it was. And that would give a real lot of credibility for what people believed. So people, for all of history, have believed God existed. Now, as I mentioned earlier, science had said science cannot look outside the physical world, the physical universe. Except, once you get to Einstein's theories of relativity, as I just proved, it is actually Einstein opened the door for the first time to allow us to look from the physical existence outside the physical. It like opened the door to what's outside the physical existence. So it's like the opening of that box. We have the situation where millions of people through all of human history have said God exists outside of space and time. So we don't expect to find God there because God's essence is unknowable. But we do expect to find Allah's attributes. Now, a lot of Allah's attributes would be hard to prove existed, such as the attribute of being merciful. What does that look like? I don't know, right? So that kind of attribute is hard to prove. But theologians, which are people who study religion, have said that all of the world's religions have what they call the primary attributes of God. In some religions, they focus very much on those primary ones. In Islam, we don't focus on them, but we know they exist. And the four primary attributes of God: one, to be eternal; two, to be omnipresent, meaning present everywhere at once; three, to be omnipotent, meaning having all power; and four, to be what's called omniscient, having all knowledge. It's SC, is it?
SC-I-E-N-T.
Oh yeah, there's my E. But
I-E-N-T.
yeah, the E was there. It's just, it was joined to the end. So those are referred to by theologians as the four primary attributes of God. Now think how amazing it would be if when the door finally opened and we could see from the physical existence into the non-physical existence or the spiritual world, and we happened to find just those four. I mean, wouldn't that be more than amazing? But it would constitute, I would say, an objective proof of the existence of God.